Today, for the final panel, we're going to be speaking to some of the independent festival sector's key figures sat here. We're going to try and establish from them what they're going through in terms of planning for a festival at the moment during COVID times, what measures they're putting in place, and also what kind of support they have been getting from outside the industry as well. So before we kick off, we'll start with John. We do introductions. Tell everyone about yourself.
Hello everybody, good afternoon. It's not a graveyard shift, it's the headline performance. I'm John Rostron, I'm a former promoter, concert and festival promoter, and I now run an organisation that supports promoters called the Association of Independent Promoters.
Thank you. I'll take these off. I don't like the sound of my own voice that much. I'm Paul Reed, I'm the Chief Executive of the Association of Independent Festivals. We're a national trade association representing around about 90 festivals, around about 40% of the market, 5,000 capacity and over. We support and represent those members.
Hello, my name's Alex Trenchard. I'm the Festival Director of Stand and Calling, which is a 17,000 capacity festival in Hertfordshire. We are a member of the AIF, and proud members of the AIF, I would say.
I'm Claire Goodchild. I run a festival production company, working with independent festivals, including Stand and Calling, We Out Here, Boomtown, and many more.
Great, and my name's Yaz. I'll be chairing the panel. I work for a company called The Fair, and we also produce festivals for independent promoters. So we'll kick off. Obviously, it was hugely exciting for everybody on the 22nd of February, I think it was, if not a little bit unexpected, when Boris announced the roadmap to recovery, and the fact that on the 21st of June, social restrictions would hopefully be removed as part of the roadmap planning. And I think, obviously, it became very quickly clear to people who were organising festivals after that time that there was still going to be a lot of measures that we would have to put in place. But I still think I speak for a lot of us when I say it's not totally clear, even now, about a month in advance of that date, what they're going to be. So the first thing I want to talk about is kind of the safety advisory group process, which we all go through in terms of planning events. I'm going to throw this one to Claire, just to kind of understand what you've been going through when you've been liaising with your local councils to organise events, and what expectations they have with regard to COVID planning.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I think I could chat for the whole panel about this one. Yeah, I mean, obviously I can only speak on behalf of my own experience and the SAGs that I work with on the shows that I work with. But I think it has been an interesting journey, very varied in terms of how people are dealing with things. I think when we realised that the local directors of public health were able to put a stop to our shows, then it kind of unnerved a lot of festivals. I think that if you're an independent festival, well, any festival really, spends a long time building a relationship with their SAG, and the SAG understands the context of the risk that we're managing, and those local public health directors, I think, often deal with things that are more like local obesity campaigns and things that aren't really around events. And all of a sudden, they're allowed to put the stop to a 50,000 cap rave in a park. So I think it made us feel a little bit uneasy, but in all fairness, also very difficult on the side of the SAG. You know, they are suddenly have to deal with something that they're not used to dealing with. And I mean, I found on some shows that I was dealing with up to 5 different people. One of my shows was 5 different people who were dealing with COVID relationships, and no names.
I just started laughing there. So no, I think you know which show.
No show names mentioned. Yeah. Obviously, I respect the confidentiality of my clients.
I don't.
But yeah, I mean, because they, you know, which made it difficult for me, but also reflected the difficulties that they were obviously having to deal with as a local authority, because, you know, they didn't know how to handle this new responsibility. And then I think it's been difficult because across multiple shows in different counties, different districts, I've had different advice, and they're dealing with it in a different way. And, you know, I mean, as event organisers, we're used to there being a lack of standardisation with our SAGs. But, you know, it does make it a lot more challenging. And I think even, you know, there's even counties that I work in where other shows are in a different district to me and they're getting different information to me. And we're in the same county. So there is a real disparity there.
And I know you and Paul obviously sit on the festival recovery steering group that speaks directly to DCMS and Public Health England every few weeks about what the guidance is going to be. Paul, are we anywhere close to knowing what the directive is going to be from central government, and then will that be disseminated very swiftly to the local authorities so there is more consistency across the board?
Yeah, I mean, so through that group we did produce some specific guidance for festivals. It's freely available on the Purple Guide website, and the whole point of that guidance, Claire was involved and inputted on this as well, was to inform those SAG conversations and to stop things, hopefully stop things unraveling at that local authority level. And, you know, your event being cancelled at the last minute by someone that you haven't met or hasn't had time to engage with you. And I think that support and the relationship with the local directors of public health is crucially important for anyone running an event this year. In terms of clarity, I mean, did you mean in any specific areas, Yaz? Or?
I suppose the music festival supplementary guidance has obviously come out and people are starting to build COVID risk assessments on that, but I know there's some things that are still up in the air. So at Sefton Park, they had testing on the gate. Is that going to be a directive, and are we going to have specifics on what we need to do for that? And also track and trace, test and trace. I know that's something that's coming out in the wash at the moment.
Yeah, so those are definitely two live conversations. So on the COVID certification and testing, government, so Michael Gove is leading on that out of the Cabinet Office, and they are engaging with industry. You know, there's been a couple of roundtables now that have felt pretty positive, quite productive. I think the industry are all pretty much on the same page about it. I just hope it can come together soon in terms of government determining. I think what they'll probably do is tier it according to capacity rather than particular type of event. So I think there'll be one capacity for, you know, large-scale stadia type events. There'll be another one, you know, there's outdoor events in which, you know, high-density crowds and people are in close proximity, i.e. festivals. And there'll probably be another one for indoor environments, which as we know, are generally considered to be a bit riskier. So government have said that they hope to have an update on that and how that's progressing, and have something to show us by the end of this month, May, which is rapidly approaching.
Next week.
That all needs to come together very quickly. In terms of the app and everything like that. But, you know, they have said they've got teams working on this and that those teams will present to the whole industry. It's just, I think what might be lacking there is that real sense of urgency in my mind. You know, we're a couple of weeks away from that announcement for Step 4, and I'm not sure there's a full understanding of, you know, we've been talking to government for 15 months trying to get them to understand everything from our planning cycle to our cost profile, and I'm not sure they've quite grasped it really. On the test and trace, I spent most of my morning on this actually, because again, there's ongoing conversations. So previously we've been advised that outdoor events wouldn't fall within the scope of it. Now I think the position is that festivals will fall within the scope of it because they contain environments like campsites and music venues, concert venues that are within the scope. So we're just working through the practical implementation of that and how best that could be, you know, can it be collected in advance effectively? You know, it's clear that they want it to be proportional and operationally straightforward for us. So you're definitely not going to have a scenario where people have to check in at every venue. But again, we do need clarity on this very quickly. It's not insurmountable, but it's yet another system to put in place. And then you get into all sorts of concerns around, well, if there's a certification system and it doesn't necessarily talk to the ticketing system, that's two separate things. And then there's test and trace, you know, and people trying to check in on the door for that. Then at scale, I think you would then start to run into problems, possibly around public safety, really. So, yeah, we just need to figure out how we're going to implement all this, but we do have active conversations with government on it. So.
Yeah, and Alex, you're obviously a festival owner, so a lot of money's on the line. 2 months to go till your show. What have you been doing to prepare, and what pressure has this uncertainty been putting on you and your planning, obviously with Claire as well?
So there's different parts of it are uncertain. I mean, even like booking artists was uncertain this year. I mean, we've only just started getting in the riders, because I think for most of this year, the agents haven't even thought that the festivals were going to happen. So I've been screaming at them for the last 3 or 4 months. Normally it's my fault that my technical team doesn't have the riders, but on this case it's actually been quite helpful, because I'm able to blame the agents for once, which is quite good. But that has led to uncertainty. We're going to have to do, normally would be like 6 months work in 2 months, on top of preparing for anything that might be around the corner to do with COVID. And I can talk about testing and things like that in a sec, because we've been sort of trying to get ahead of what government may be about doing there, because our date's the 22nd of July, which is exactly 6 weeks after Boris's statement on the 14th. So, but in terms of the pressure, it's time pressure. It's people haven't. We've been umming and ahhing about whether the season is going to go ahead, and the people we're working with haven't believed in it. Whether that is agents or whether that is suppliers understandably haven't been sure. They haven't wanted to commit to certain events without there being money on the table, when previously they might have, and that's all really, really understandable. But I would say that what has really helped us was we were unsuccessful in the first round of the Culture Recovery Fund, but thanks to people like Paul and John, we were successful in the second round, and what that has given us is a bit of cash flow that we didn't have at the equivalent of last year. And my view is that cash flow, the whole point of the CRF was for the arts sector. So we're making sure we're putting we're spending that Arts Council money on our supply chain to help our suppliers, the agents we work with, and everyone, in order that the industry can move along. And that, because we've done that, if it doesn't happen, those deposits can be made sure we just spend the money on deposits that will roll over to next year, and that's the whole point of the CRF, in my view. That's bought us some time. So it's kind of made it be easier to deal with these uncertainties, and the government really should be congratulated for that. It's, obviously not everyone was lucky enough to be successful, and I know what that was like, because we didn't get it in round one, and then we were in a situation in January where the company could have collapsed. But we pulled through, we wrote a good application, and then we got into February when we sold more tickets in a week than we ever had in a month, And so since about February, March, it's become other issues. It's that we've had an audience that really wants to get ahead and go forward, attend festivals, and it's us who've been wondering whether it's going to be able to happen or not. And the key issue here is, what is the government guidance going to be? And this is, as everyone's been talking about. And we don't know, but I think it's safe to assume there will be an element of testing. So on that basis, we thought we'd get ahead and find our own way forward with testing, but not on a national level necessarily. We wanted to engage locally. So we made our key target to engage with our local public health director in Hertfordshire. And just echoing what Claire was just saying, there's what is different this year is we've moved from dealing with a SAG at a district level, to dealing with a director of public health at a county level. And there's a disconnect often between the district level and the county level in terms of not always working together around things like events. So I think they're catching up a bit in the same way the work. They don't even have any guidance yet, so they're in a difficult position. But what is key is engaging with the public health director. It's their patch. And the point that really was echoed yesterday or the day before, when is it the 8 or the 13 boroughs that have the India variant is of concern, and the government issued the guidance from central government, and then these 8 or 13 boroughs were up in arms, like, hang on a minute. And what was the next bit of communication that came out? It was a joint statement by all the public health directors of those boroughs. And I think that really showed that this isn't just a national thing, it's a local thing. And they got together and said, no, we are open. You can travel to Bolton or whatever it was. And that's why, in my view, local public health is important. And it's going to be more important, assuming the roadmap does go to stage 4, it's going to be up to them. And so that's why, as far as our approach to testing, and we are working with with the public health department of a world-leading institution, in our approach to risk modeling, standard calling from a COVID perspective. But we, along with that institution, we have been engaging with our public health director, and he has been extremely positive in the initial first 2 meetings. And I think that is key.
Yeah, we've actually had a few SAGs, and local public health actually do seem to be receptive and realistic, and quite supportive of events going ahead. So hopefully that will lead to sort of more positive engagement and practical engagement. John, obviously you work with a number of other promoters, or they're members of AIP. Outside of the kind of pressures that Alex has just mentioned, are there any other pressures that they're feeling in terms of preparing for reopening?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Alex has articulated really well the pressures of what it's like to be a festival director, not least the fact that boutique festival industry's been around for 15, 16, 20 years, and so everybody really knows what they're doing, and then this year everything's gone back to front, and inside out and upside down. I mean, our members at the Association of Independent Promoters are predominantly, so that, first and foremost, the concert promoters, but they might have a festival or run a few festivals or be involved in festivals. If they're exclusively festivals, we always signpost them to AIF. So their pressures are really, all of those things, but on top, the additional pressures they have. Like right now, a lot of them, they're back in business, right? Their concerts are happening again. The immediate pressures they've found is that they're really rusty because they've been closed in a halt last year. They've lost staff or furloughed staff. They've been really busy rescheduling shows, but they haven't been operational. And then they're back, but they're not back as they were. They're back with this kind of heightened awareness about trying to get everything right. And they're rusty. But meanwhile, they've also got all of these pressures for their festival market, which is further down the road. Some of them have ones that have unfortunately already cancelled or postponed. So they're having the same pressures that Alex has got. What's unique and different for them sometimes is that with the artist booking, they might be the promoter for the artist in an area, and they might have options about whether they're going to do a concert show or do a festival show. And it's the do they, don't they, what do we do, what's more likely to happen. They want events to happen. It's interesting you mentioned the pressure of COF. Those that have been successful with the Culture Recovery Fund, actually a lot of them do feel an additional pressure, which I think you seem to be articulating, that they want to be able to put the activity on and spend the money because they feel a responsibility to the whole sector to get everybody back. So the decision about do we commit to this festival or do we commit to that indoor concert is heightened because they really want to make sure that whatever they pick happens. And they're finding that really hard to choose. Will it be outdoors in a field? Will it be indoors in a venue? They don't know. And so that's a real life pressure that they're kind of going through constantly, right now. Trying to juggle that and trying to like you have these incredible deadlines to try and work. They have events that have sold out. I mean, demand is really high. Tickets might be sold, but where are they in their production delivery and all those kind of pressures about when do we say yes it's going to happen or when do we pull the plug. I also bring into context that that's the members in England. We've got members in Wales and Scotland who are just sitting there, can't do anything, right? And there's additional pressures there. And there's so you talked about sort of different levels of council and district, but we've got different levels of what the government has in terms of performance guidelines and then how the councils interpret it. And there's a real disparity there, not least that if you're sitting there in Wales with your venues closed or you're unable to do any kind of performance unless it's a government-sanctioned test event, meanwhile you can hop over the border and there's something happening. It's incredibly frustrating for the promoters as well as for the audiences and for the artists and everyone. So, I live in Wales and I'm watching all the Welsh artists do their shows coming to England, to English audiences, and I'm feeling the frustration for all of the Welsh promoters, the same in Scotland, same in Northern Ireland. So, and something really I'm not saying who's right and who's wrong, but it's very hard right now to be in one of those other countries while all this entertainment's happening. Because first and foremost, we're all in it for the shows and the artists and having going to those events. So
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very difficult.
It's a labour of love, isn't it, really, why we all do it. And going back to audience then, you kind of mentioned their expectations. People are feeling pressured to put on an event to kind of appease the audience, got Arts Council funding. They've been waiting for so long. They've been very loyal. I suppose from our end, you mentioned that ticket rush as well, selling more tickets than ever before without doing any marketing.
Yeah.
Maybe this is one for Claire, who's doing a lot of the operational planning for events, but how are you feeling about this kind of unknown audience who might have forgotten how to go to a festival and trying to relearn their behaviours or remember how they act or what their levels are for intoxication and things like that? Is that a factor you're looking at the moment?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting one actually that has come up recently. I've had this from police harm reduction teams, from SAGs. They've all kind of realised that actually this is a potential issue for over the summer, that we need to look out for, potentially more vulnerable people than we might have had before. But I think in terms of who we are as festival organisers, we're very used to dealing with that kind of situational vulnerability. So people who might not normally be vulnerable elsewhere, but when they come onto your site and they are intoxicated or under the influence, then they become more vulnerable. And I think we realise that, and it's a case of us maybe stepping up our medical cover, reassessing our medical risk assessments in terms of drugs and alcohol. But then I also think there's other areas, mental health, for example. I think that, there's shows that I work with, like Boomtown, for example, who really are big advocates of mental health and have a lot of mental health cover and resilience on site. But then I've had to actually step that up for my other shows this year, because you're talking about an audience that maybe might not be used to being in a crowd, and they haven't been in a crowd for 18 months. Again, like you said, they might not be used to taking drugs, their tolerance might have gone down. But then also for staff, we've got staff who are suddenly thrown back into 12-hour days, really stressful situations, so looking at that for the staff side as well. And then I think if you've got an unknown audience, looking at things like your safeguarding policies and stuff, is it a new demographic? Is your safeguarding policy robust enough to deal with a new crowd that you might not be used to? I think it's definitely on people's radars, especially SAGs. So I would advise people to have a look at those assessments again.
Yeah, definitely. And interesting what you mentioned about crew as well. I definitely think that's something really important to consider. Like, it's quite a long road through the season, and we're all a bit rusty, so yeah, definitely staff welfare is really key. Going back to kind of support the industry is or is not receiving, obviously a huge topic is around insurance, government-backed insurance scheme for COVID cancellation, just to give us all a bit more security when putting down deposits. I might look to Paul on this one. From my knowledge, the TV and film one kind of kicked off in October, but it was signed off in July, so there's that kind of lag of 4 months before it came into place. If the government were to turn around tomorrow and say, which I'm not saying they will, if they were to turn around tomorrow and say, yeah, cool, we'll go ahead with the scheme, how long would it take for that to kick in, and which festivals would benefit from that?
Yeah, thanks, Yaz. That's a really good question, and insurance has weirdly become a specialist subject. So yeah, I'm in the mastermind chair. I think where we are is government has demonstrated a sort of willingness to act beyond step 4. If you take the recent comments of the Culture Secretary at Select Committee, he was quite clear that they stand ready to intervene in a similar way that they did to film and TV. Now, I think that we have been talking about this for 6 months. They've caveated that with, if this is still a problem in the commercial market, well, we know it will be, because we know from talking to everybody in the insurance market that it isn't going to mobilise at any sort of commercially viable level until at least next year. So I think government know that that's going to be a barrier. I think, given the concerns around variants, etc., perhaps their position is more reasonable in waiting until the confirmation of step 4. In terms of mobilising it, there's a lot of background. It's worth saying there's modelling going on there's particular teams being set up within government to look at this. Although, they try and weirdly keep it a bit secret, but it's kind of an open secret that they've got a team looking at this and working with the insurance industry. I mean, you made the point on film and TV being announced last July, I think, and not operational till October.
Yeah.
I think it's important to point out that they did backdate it to cover the productions from the end of June. So effectively, from the point of agreeing it in principle, they then had to thrash out the details, which did take 2 to 3 months. So we would hope for a similar approach. I think they have accepted that there is market failure. I think, we provided every shred of evidence and data that they've requested over a period of many, many months, many conversations, AIF and the entire live industry and live. We've all been working together on this issue, and I think the fact that government had to effectively underwrite their pilot events for the ERP as well, because there's no solution in the commercial market. So truly that is, surely that is an acceptance of market failure. And there will hopefully be that willingness to act shortly after the Step 4 confirmation. I think my feeling is we will get something. It's just a question of when and what the scope will be. I mean, I get that one of the challenges for government is they can't really just apply it to one part of the events sector, because it is equally relevant to all sort of outdoor events. So I think they need to look at that broad brush solution. But there's certainly no shortage of proposals. And, our initial argument around it, I think, Treasury have kind of the view that there's quite a blockage there in terms of the Treasury, and so we don't want to really invest in this. But actually, if everything goes according to plan and we unlock, it won't cost the taxpayer a penny. So the argument is, essentially back your own roadmap so that we can plan with confidence given our planning cycles. So many people are in that quite fraught position of, pushing their decisions down the road, not committing to deposits, etc. But everyone's going to hit that cutoff point, and many have already. We've already seen over a quarter of festivals over 5,000 capacity in the UK have been cancelled, and all of them have mentioned that insurance issue. So I think there's sufficient evidence and data out there. It just needs to translate into action, and it would definitely need to be backdated to cover the activity across the season.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Paul. That's really interesting. Definitely some things I didn't know in there as well. But it sounds more positive than maybe it did a few weeks ago. So hopefully that gives people a bit of faith. We mentioned briefly, I think it was Alex talking about artists. And I suppose one factor in terms of festival bookings, especially for independents, often is a lot of international travel or international artists coming across to the UK. I've seen a lot of lineups that still do have international talent on them, but I wondered if you had any sort of knowledge from speaking to your members about what plans they thought they might have to put in place, if people were looking to go more local, what people were thinking about that international artist booking.
Yeah, well, it reflects a little bit on what I was saying before, which is when an international artist comes over, they tend not just to be playing a festival, they're probably playing some club shows too, for all different kinds of reasons, reaching out geographically, making sure the budget works and so on, or just, they're making their big trip. How likely is it that those international artists are now going to go ahead? What's interesting is that a lot of those international artists also, because they're traveling internationally, those shows and tours are booked way more in advance than perhaps the UK acts are to play their home territory. So there's a weird sort of situation going on that for various reasons, a lot of them because they were planning their tours last year, they've been held and they've been rolled over and they've been rolled over to, in the hope that the activity would return. There's an element also of trying to keep the money within the sector. The tickets are sold, so the artist doesn't want to refund everybody if the show is likely to go ahead, neither does the promoter, neither does the festival. And we're kind of caught in this weird situation now where those are all sort of in place, but actually the reality is changing. The shows are held and the tickets might be sold, but actually now the cost of the tour for the artist is hugely changing because of quarantine or hotels or other conditions and the and so their tour budget or Brexit and their tour budgets are starting to look very different, and there's huge pressure about whether they could even keep that show or those shows even if everything kind of cleared and everything was permission to go ahead. Some of them had already laid out a huge amount of costs that they haven't been able to recover. So it's a really interesting challenge. And our promoters as well are also looking at things. There's such demand. We're seeing a huge demand from audiences, but we're also seeing a huge demand from artists. Artists want to go back out and play. Not only all the ones that were meant to play last year, but all the ones that we're going to play this year. And then all the ones that weren't going to do anything want to get back out. So from a promoter's perspective, I hope Alex would reflect on this too. Lots of artists want to come out and play. And if you're running a festival or a show, you're trying to then go, well, actually, what's the most likely that's going to happen? Is it the one that I've already got on sale, or that international act that I've already got booked? Or is it actually this British artist, actually, with COVID conditions, is that actually more likely to happen? But the mechanisms by which your guarantees are paid, your deposits are paid, and to be responsible to the artist, you can't boot that artist out quite yet. So there's a really interesting challenge. We had a conversation within our membership earlier this year. Somebody actually said, should we not just be buying British? Would it not be better for the sector as a whole if we just kind of agreed that it's more likely that British acts are going to happen, and we just had a kind of an amnesty where all the agents and the artists and everyone said, we're just going to release all those holds and all the international artists and put the British artists in because it's more likely. And there was a conversation about whether we could do that, but that would mean everybody down the supply chain agreeing that that was okay, including those poor artists at the end, and you've got to remember those artists at the end. So, that's not happened, but it's not to say it might not, it might not say it might not happen, because outside of the festival, I don't know, again, in the clubs, there's a huge demand, venues are fully booked up, and there's people knocking at the door needing dates or wanting dates, so there's a huge pressure, and that might come to an explosion at some point where somebody has to make a decision like that and say, actually, no, I'm sorry, these shows can't happen. We're going to put these ones instead, because even if the band you're putting in isn't worth as many tickets, it's more likely to happen, and we need it to happen.
But, yeah, that's an interesting thing, because actually what we found when we started booking in with October and then through to about February, is because artists hadn't been out for a whole year. Agents didn't actually necessarily know where to bill them, because a lot of artists had really, really high streaming numbers but had never played a show because they'd lost a year. So actually, in some ways, particularly for UK acts, actually, this festival season happening this summer is a real opportunity for emerging UK acts, because actually they haven't got the non-UK acts. The agents weren't sure they're basically being billed on lineups based on streaming numbers, which means that they've really jumped up the bills, which is really good for UK music, I think. At Standon we have 4 artists. We have 2 US acts and 1 Belgian act and 1 Irish act, but everything else is UK based. And the US act, the US now has a 50% vaccination rate, so I'm not completely. I still believe we have Sister Sledge and we have De La Soul. And I saw that De La Soul had cancelled Dreamlands. I can't remember when, I think just before our show. And I emailed them and I said, are you still, well, they hadn't cancelled Dreamlands, I think Dreamlands get cancelled. And they said, no, we're coming just to do Standing Calling, which obviously means I'm paying way too much. But
they're really excited about Standon, I think.
Well, they just want to play.
But we'll see. Yeah. They just want to play, but the devil will be in the detail when they do pull out. But then I'll be able to fill it with an amazing UK act.
Have you read that rider yet?
No. No, I haven't. Yeah.
No, I'm glad you mentioned a positive, because that's kind of leading on to the next question before we go to the audience and see if they have any questions. But obviously, we've talked a lot about the challenges, but there's definitely been a lot of positives that I've seen coming out of this. Things like a lot of the work people on this panel have been doing to get more recognition for the industry across government and media is just being one of those things. So I guess I want to go round maybe and ask each of you what a sort of takeaway positive thing that you've gained from this is. Maybe if we start at Claire, the other way.
I think it probably sounds really cheesy, but I'm going to go with collaboration. Yeah, that's my word of the day. I think because if you would have said to me 18 months ago, I could ring up another event organiser who is essentially a commercial competitor and be like, do you want to share operational documents? I would have laughed, but actually that is what's happening, and it's been refreshing, and it's been educating, and it's been wonderful. I mean, it's been mentioned on this stage before, you know, that people like Festival Republic, John Probyn, has been really, really open with what they've been doing and stuff, and it's so useful to us smaller independents to do that. So I would say collaboration.
Yeah, I think that's been a huge positive as well. Yeah, I agree. Alex?
I think that the UK festival going audience has realised that he really missed going to festivals.
Yeah.
And perhaps after the 2019 season, there was a sense that festivals had become a bit of a industry year in, year out, and things maybe were getting a bit stale. The audience had quite forgotten why they were going to them. But I think a year out has really re-energized our audience, and I think that's a really, really positive thing. I think to a certain extent it was needed. And I'm really looking forward to delivering a festival for an audience that really wants to come, an audience that supported us with a crowdfunder, an audience that 81% rolled over their tickets from one year to another. We realised how much we owe them, and it reminded me that I'm putting on a show for them, not for a job.
Yeah, I think that's true. Customer loyalty has been really, you know, overwhelming at times. It's been really nice to see how loyal the customers have been. Even in response to cancellations this year. So, Paul?
I don't know how to follow that. They're both brilliant answers. They just nicked everything I was going to say, but I might as well I'll just go home now.
That's why I sat here.
Exactly. That's why you put me in the middle, isn't it? I get it now. Yeah, just to elaborate on Claire's point around collaboration, I think you've seen that not only across individual companies, but the trade associations as well. So things like the formation of Live, you know, that's been amazing in terms of lobbying, you know, myself and John and the other trade associations having weekly meetings and sharing information, everyone being really engaged about that. I think people have understood the kind of importance of trade associations in general. Perhaps I would say that, but I think in a crisis, you need someone to support and represent you, and government don't want to talk to lots of individual businesses. And I think we've been able to do that, and our membership's certainly grown significantly in this period without me having any time whatsoever to proactively approach anyone, which I think is generally a positive sign. I think as well, like, our profile's never been higher in terms of government and media, really, in terms of government understanding what we do at the outset of the pandemic, that, you know, we talk to them about isolated issues, but I think they understand far more about our industry now. I think media as well, I think audience appreciation, all of that really, and that all stands us in good stead. And yeah, I've never seen so much coming together across the industry. You know, you mentioned Festival Republic. I mean, they did the pilot event in Sefton Park. You know, they sent me the operational plan for that and risk assessment and said, share that with all of your members, which is amazing, you know. So there has been that level of openness. You know, we supported them on the pilot. A lot of our members gave tickets to try and incentivize post-event testing. So that's been a real positive. And I think beyond COVID, if we can dare to start speaking about that, if we can start coalescing around the important issues like the climate emergency and like diversity in the industry and all of these things, then we can have a great power. So I just hope that holds together post-COVID.
Can I just say one thing? Sorry, because that was my other thing I wanted to say, but I forgot it. But the other really amazing thing of the last year has, as Paul said, it's been how the industry's come together. But it's also the really amazing thing of the last year has been Paul Reed, because Paul.
I was going to say that.
Oh, sorry. Okay, but
no, you go.
But it really has. We Paul over the year that our voice has strengthened and strengthened. Government has listened. You talk to middle ranking or junior civil servants, they all know who Paul Reed is. You know, and it's been incredible, Paul. And what a lot of people don't actually know is Paul's done that all by himself. I think since September it's just been you, and he has worked tirelessly for all of us independent festivals, and I'm incredibly grateful. I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you.
And if
getting mentioned up
I slipped him a £5 earlier.
Yeah.
He pretty much delivered it. Yeah.
Can I get that discount on my subscription? No.
Very kind words, Alex.
If
Thank you.
Denisol will cancel, then Paul's going to step in as the headline actor and stand and call it. I was going to say a positive about trade associations. Like, we were a relatively new trade association, the Association of Independent Promoters. We had about 30 members pre-COVID, and we were going to sort of go off and try and recruit people, but COVID's actually just brought them all to us, because all of these promoters who were like, oh, I need help, where can I go? Then they found us, and sometimes it was through AIF or Music Venues Trust or other people signposting saying these are the guys that can help. But I'd say it might be a controversial positive, but just one to throw in was, I was really pleased to see all the illegal parties last year. Not
Cut the mic.
Not that I condone free parties and legal parties, but there was something like really exciting about young people wanting to go out. And actually, there was a slight political change when it was like, I think for governments, they were like, well, actually, these people are going to want to go out, and so now we're going to either have to divert money to try and control that, or maybe we should pay more attention to the festival and the promotion sector.
The people who know how to manage
and it's a budget thing at the end of the day, isn't it? And it's like, what do we want to do? Do we want to try and have them at these illegal events, or do we want to put them into proper controlled, properly organised events? Who does that? These guys do it. So, but also it was just exciting to see young people out, So I thought that, and partly I've met a few people who did them, and they're potential promoters and members in the future. They're quite entrepreneurial shows. So there was just something quite moving, I think, about just some young people's desire to just want to go and have some fun. And despite everything that was going on, they couldn't see their families, they couldn't see this, they just wanted to do it. And there's something kind of quite exciting about that. I just hope they do it in a proper organised environment.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, that's why we all do our jobs, isn't it? Like seeing, bringing people together like that in that environment, but safely. We have a wealth of amazing knowledge and experience up here, so I just wanted to throw it out if anyone has any questions, needs some advice, wants to talk about their experience. No?
Come on, there's thousands of you out there. It's the light in my eyes.
There's more than I thought would be, to be fair.
they're just queuing for Paul's autograph later. He's doing the signing down the corner.
One of you must have a question.
Okay, cool. Well, I suppose, the thing I wanted to end on then, if there was no questions from the audience, was one piece of advice each of you would give to anyone involved in producing a festival or large-scale outdoor event currently. Should we swap it around? Should we start with you, Alex?
Yeah, okay. It's been a long road. I mean, the last year, 13, 14 months, and I think everyone's really sort of kept on going and going and going, and I think it's been a real challenge to particularly independent festival promoters, and I know some of them we've become very close over that time, and I think though we're not that far off now, and I guess I would just say hang in there for the next few weeks. Don't make any decisions in that time unless you have a really big reason to make that decision, because a lot's going to potentially change over the next 4 weeks, and I just so I would just say hang in there really.
Wise words. John?
I'd say get good at bid writing. One of the things that unfortunately Alex has seen, he really went through the mill, but a lot of these festivals, they just do it, they just do it. They've never rely on any kind of public subsidy or public funding. And then when eventually, fortunately, there was some funding available, there's a whole new skill set to learn. And it's a really difficult thing to do. There will be a Culture Recovery 3 in England, so regardless of whether your event goes ahead or not, or whatever happens, it's likely that you might want to be lining up for that. So build those skills in. But I also think as a positive, there might be, or seems to be a shift where perhaps public funding may become a part or a small part of all cultural events in the future. I mean, certainly, that it happens abroad, it happens elsewhere. It's understood, and it should really happen in this country, in all the 4 nations that we have here. So build that into your team or into your thinking or into your planning. You know, hopefully you won't desperately need it, but you hopefully, you know, you might need it as something to support you through.
Yeah, brilliant. And Claire, piece of advice from you?
How do I follow these great answers? I don't want to teach anyone to suck eggs, but as independent festivals, we are really good at managing risk, and that's what we need to be doing right now. So we need to be looking at how we manage our risk. We need to be agile, we need to be flexible, and we're in the position to do that because we're smaller and we're independent. So carry on doing what we're good at, and that is to manage your risk and to remain agile and to be measured in your approach to COVID.
Paul, final word from you, final piece of advice?
My advice to anyone running a festival: join a trade association. Join a union, mate. Hopefully I won't have to. So what is it you actually do again? Hopefully I won't be asked that one for a while. Yeah, I mean, beyond that, to build on Alex's comments about kind of keeping the faith, I think there's a huge audience appetite out there. You know, we saw the live survey recently, 75% of audiences are ready to return to live music events with the right mitigations in place. And, you know, we've proved to be really resilient, really creative throughout all of this, really. So I think it's important. You know, we had one member on a call, Ben Robinson from the Fields, and he was saying to everyone, you know, because it was going through this horrendous situation, and he was like, just remember, we've got the next 10 years of independent festivals, and we're going to come out of this really, really strong. So I think it's important to remember that on the down days, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I suppose a piece of advice from me would just be, not to be too hard on ourselves this year as well, because it's been a really rough year and we've all done a great job, so don't be too hard on yourself, guys. Thank you so much for coming and staying. Thank you to our amazing panellists.
Thank you for hosting.
Thank you, and thanks to Event Production Show for bringing us all together.